Yo, what's good with you? Back in black with another Enlisted video. If you guys are new to the channel and you love shooting games just like me, make sure you aim for that like button and shoot that subscribe button as well. It'll help you find better teammates and improve your skill-based matchmaking. At least I hope so. In this video, we're going to be doing a review for the Uragan SMG. This is a brand new BR2 submachine gun for the Russian army, falling into the same archetype as most of the other Soviet SMGs in BR2. So a lot of people have been wondering if this addition was even necessary per se, but before we try and make that determination, we gotta talk about the lore behind the weapon, and then we'll move into the stats and performance before giving an overall rating. Taking a look at the description and trying to expand on it a little bit more than they do per usual, this was actually a lesser known submachine gun by M.M. Berezin, who was a partisan that ever so ironically had the same name as a famous Russian weapon designer known for his aircraft machine gun and cannons. But funny enough, they were only related by last name and profession apparently, so it is kinda ironic that they would both go on to contribute to the war effort in the same way under the same identity. Going back to the Uragan itself, this weapon was also known as the Hurricane and was distinct in the fact that it used parts from other weapons like the barrel of a Mosin rifle, which I'm sure was easy to find in Eastern Europe at the time, and the iron sights of captured MP40s and MP38s that didn't work anymore, which made it easy to produce in partisan workshops. Moving into the stats, finally, the first thing we want to take a look at is always going to be our maximum damage, which is going to be clocking in at 5.6 per shot, which is the same as many of the contemporaries aside from the PPSH Brez in that tier. Basically, as long as your target is within 10 meters, it'll only take you 2 shots to down them provided they don't have any vitality. But what you need to understand is that the damage drop off on submachine guns is always going to be pretty steep, as the weapon archetype should be. So what you gotta know as well is that the damage is going to drop down to a measly 2.8 all the way out to 100 meters. So when you factor in body multipliers as well, if you are hitting somebody in the arms and legs on top of suffering from severe damage drop off like most subs are prone to, it'll kind of feel like you're shooting marshmallows for the most part. So try to keep your engagements as close as possible for the most part. Muzzle velocity is also the same as any other SMG in the tier at 450 meters per second, so in the grand scheme of things, the bullets do travel kind of slowly, which will further limit your range, stretching capabilities with this weapon. Not to say that it's impossible to shoot people at medium range with this weapon, but around 50 meters is where you'll notice it'll start to get, kind of dicey, and basically you'll be getting outside of your niche for sure. Rate of fire on the Uragan takes the new second place spot at 750 rounds per minute, which isn't going to feel much different than the PPS 43, but it's still a higher number, which theoretically should mean a faster time to kill overall provided you hit all your shots, so that is nice. Reload speed is also right in the middle of the pack at 2.5 seconds, so not the best and not the worst, but it won't take long to get back in the fight necessarily either, especially if you do your alternate reload, which should be notably faster since you don't have to cock the weapon before shooting it again. Something important to note here, since I am talking about reloading, is that this weapon does have the lowest bullet capacity in the tier at 32 rounds per mag. So if you're one of those players who are basically like the more bullets the merrier type beat, then this is something that I wanted to bring to your attention. But it's not too crazy because you're only losing 3 bullets, but something I did want to point out. Much like the Fedorov 1912 rifle from my last video, this weapon enters the chat sporting a pretty bad shot deviation at 95, which is only beat out by the PPSH Brez, but basically since these are both makeshift weapons, it does kind of make sense, so I won't complain too much. What you need to understand about shot deviation is that the forward projecting theoretical cone for how far your bullets can spread out in front of you will be quite large, and that can't be remedied until you fully upgrade the weapon, which is something we'll talk about a little bit later. Recoil is just another one of those stats on SMGs that tries to limit your effective range overall, and as it pertains to the Uragan in particular, it is very average from a vertical perspective at 28 and pretty good from a horizontal perspective at 9, but I do find the horizontal stat to be a little misleading as the recoil does tend to drag a fair bit to the right while climbing upward modestly. Unfortunately, the recoil control percentage is average as well at 60%, so nothing too stand out in that area either, but I would recommend pulling downward and to the left slightly when shooting this weapon and making sure you invest in some vertical recoil control perks as well, as that will help you keep your flurry of bullets on target, which is also the main thing you want to do with SMGs. Moving into this next section, I want to transition and talk about how it feels using this weapon going all the way from base level to 3 stars fully upgraded. And to speak on the 1-star upgrade, I find this upgrade to be a little bit insulting in the fact that it even costs money to begin with, as we are only receiving a 10% reduction in our reload time, which will bring you from 2.5 seconds down to 2.3 respectively. And like I said, I find this change to be almost null and void, because 2.2 seconds is very rarely ever going to save your life in the grand scheme of things, and your overall performance with the weapon should remain unchanged. I will say, to be fair, I guess the alternate reload should be a smidge faster as well, but considering the fact that we are getting a higher rate of fire and we're losing 3 bullets in our magazine size at 32 rounds per mag, is one of those things where, like, when you're using an SMG, you know, in the ranges you're supposed to, and you're trying to kill a bunch of people, very often is it hard to take advantage of the alternate reload, and I find myself emptying the entire mag often. So I guess in the grand scheme of things, I'm not going to hate on the upgrade too much. I just don't think it should even cost money at all. It should probably be one of those things that's like free for extensive use of the gun and leveling the squad up. But you know, just my personal opinion. Once you hit 2 stars, this is where the upgrades for this weapon will become much more notable, as you are bestowed a 15% bonus to your rate of fire, now taking you to 860 rounds per minute instead of 750, and you will also receive a negative 10% reduction to your vertical recoil, now at 26, as well as your horizontal recoil, which will go down 1 to 8 instead of 9, which it was before. The faster rate of fire makes you more of a force at close range than you were already, increasing your time to kill theoretically, as well as making the weapon more controllable. But per usual, 3 stars is where our upgrades become basically maxed out. Once you hit 3 stars, then you really start going crazy with this gun, as you are now getting a 20% bonus to your hit power, which will now bring you to 6.7 per shot, and a 15% reduction to your shot deviation, which will, doing the math, take you down to 76 from 95, which is much better in my personal opinion. Both of these attributes essentially extend your effective range with this weapon as well. In regard to the iron sights on this weapon, much like the lore of the weapon suggests, it essentially is more of an open version of an MP40 iron sight, which I find to be very enjoyable to use, and it's a shame that the shot deviation doesn't like automatically match up with how easy it is to use the sights and how easy it is to see people out there, even medium or sometimes long range with this sight as well. It's just that you won't have the ability or need to take down any of those targets because that's outside of your niche. But overall, after looking at the stats between a fully upgraded PPS 43 and a fully upgraded Uragan, that's when I became quite perplexed. As I stated earlier in the video, this weapon doesn't necessarily fill a needed or different niche for the BR2 Russian submachine guns, but essentially it's just a better version or a different flavor of an existing archetype. So in a lot of ways, I can see why a lot of people out there are confused at the entry of this weapon into the game, but that's not necessarily a slight against the gun in any way, shape, or form. If a PPS 43 is a can of regular Coke, you could basically consider the Uragan a can of Coke vanilla, and then maybe you could consider the PPS 42 a can of cherry Coke. And with that said, it really just depends on what flavor of Coke you like best, whether the Uragan is worth it to you or not. But for the most part, the stats are slightly better depending on what you look for mainly in the SMG. And as I always say, the more options the merrier. On a scale of 1 to 10, I would give this gun a solid 5.5 out of 10 at base, but once fully upgraded, it could be a strong 7.5 or a weak 8 depending on how your soldiers are perked out. But that's just my personal opinion. I am more curious to know what you guys are thinking down there in the comment section. For those of you who have used this SMG extensively, what would you rate it on a scale of 1 to 10, and how have you played with it to, you know, basically implement the most successful playstyle with this makeshift submachine gun? Let me know down there in the comment section. And while you're down there, don't forget to aim for that like button and shoot that subscribe button as well. It'll help you find better teammates and improve skill-based matchmaking. I do appreciate you guys for watching, and I hope you guys have a lovely rest of your day. Black Guy out.